My name is Loretta Vaughn, and before everything fell apart, I was known as the devoted wife of Elias Vaughn for 43 years, and the mother of a daughter I once believed I'd raised with love. Amara Von Holt was supposed to be my pride, but the day she told me to leave my own home, I realized I had spent decades loving someone who didn't know the meaning of the word. Elias had died 6 weeks earlier from a sudden heart attack. One moment he was sitting in his recliner watching a different world, the next he was gone, and my world crumbled with him, while I was still trying to breathe through the grief. Amara appeared at my doorstep dressed in a designer suit that cost more than my monthly grocery bill, speaking to me like a woman who had places to be. "Mom, you can't keep living here alone," she said with a smooth rehearsed tone, her hand resting on my shoulder like she was consoling a stranger. "The stairs, the upkeep, this house is too much for you." Behind her, her husband, Kendrick Holt, stood with his arms crossed, nodding along as if he were the authority on my life. I should have recognized the calculation behind her words. Elias always spoiled her, always calling her his princess. Meanwhile, I was invisible, the wife who cooked, cleaned, held the family together, and received no credit for it. After the funeral, the manipulation only intensified. Amara and Kendrick came to dinner weekly, waiting until the table was cleared before sliding brochures toward me: retirement homes, senior apartments, low-maintenance living options. Kendrick spoke like a financial advisor selling me a discounted life. "You'd have activities, friends, freedom. It's safer this way." What they meant was, no mother, no complication, no interference with what they wanted. But the real betrayal arrived like a knife disguised as kindness. That Tuesday morning, I was folding blankets in the guest room, the only room I could bear to sleep in since Elias passed, when my door swung open. Amara and Kendrick walked in with 2 suitcases. "Mom," Amara said, smoothing her hair, "we've made a decision." I felt a coldness settle in my bones. "What decision?" "Kendrick's new promotion is downtown," she said. "We need to move into this house immediately. It's perfect for us." I stared at her, unable to understand how my own child could say that. "Move in. This is my home." Her polite mask dropped. Behind her eyes was nothing but ice. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the accounts, all of it." She lifted her chin as if she were lecturing a student. "I've been letting you stay here out of kindness, but it's time for you to find somewhere else." My heart squeezed. "Amara, that can't be right." "It is. Dad trusted me to handle the money." "You were never good with finances," she said with a small laugh. "You were just the wife." Just the wife. 43 years of love and sacrifice dismissed like yesterday's news. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything about who I was, and who I would become. "Mom, find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." I packed in silence. Years of my life folded into 2 suitcases and a shoebox of photographs. Amara stood at the doorway checking her watch, tapping her heel impatiently like I was making her late for a brunch reservation. "There's a senior complex on Briarwood Road," she said brightly. "Very affordable." Affordable. She believed she was inheriting $54 million, yet she sent me to a place meant for people with nowhere else to go. Kendrick carried my bags to their BMW like he was taking out trash. "Loretta, this is good for you," he murmured. A fresh start. He wouldn't meet my eyes. They drove me to a cheap motel called Sunset Haven, where the neon lights flickered and the carpets smelled like old cigarettes. Amara pressed $200 into my hand as though she were tipping a hotel maid. "This should cover a few days. We'll send you something once we organize Dad's paperwork." Something from what she believed was her inheritance. After they left, I sat on the thin motel mattress with the room's stale air closing in around me. Grief, betrayal, humiliation, they all collapsed together until I couldn't distinguish where one ended and the other began. But as I stared at the peeling wallpaper, a single truth cut through the fog. Elias would never have left me with nothing, and I had seen the real Will years ago. Whatever Amara showed me was a lie. That realization didn't just spark anger, it lit a fuse that was about to burn everything she thought she owned. The next morning, I woke up in the motel feeling like my skin no longer fit my body. The thin blanket did nothing to chase off the cold. But it wasn't the temperature, it was the realization that something was deeply wrong. Elias had been private, yes, stubborn about money, yes, but he was never careless. He was organized down to the last paperclip, and he'd shown me his will years earlier. The version Amara used to shove me out carried none of his voice. I sat at the small desk, using the motel's slow Wi-Fi to look up the number of attorney Harrison Fitzgerald. the man who had handled our house purchase and all of Elias's business matters. He was downtown, 20 minutes away. 2 bus transfers. It didn't matter. I grabbed my purse, zipped my coat, and left that depressing room behind. When I stepped into Fitzgerald's office, mahogany floors, framed degrees, and the faint smell of peppermint tea, felt my breath catch. His secretary's eyes widened the moment she recognized me. Within seconds, the door to his office opened. "Loretta," he said, rising from behind his desk. My goodness, I was beginning to worry. "I called your home several times, but Amara told me you were traveling." "Traveling?" My mouth tightened. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I need to talk to you about Elias's will." He adjusted his glasses, confusion clouding his face. "Of course. Didn't Amara give you your copy after the reading?" "The reading?" My heart sank. There was a reading. He blinked. "Yes, the day after the funeral. You were supposed to be there. Amara said you were too emotionally overwhelmed and asked us to proceed. She assured me she would explain everything to you." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the leather chair. "Mr. Fitzgerald, she never told me anything. She said she inherited everything. She said Elias left me nothing." For a moment, the man's entire demeanor changed. Confusion shifted into alarm, then into something sharper, professional outrage. He opened a thick file on his desk, flipping through pages until he pulled out a folder with a familiar signature on the first page. "Loretta," he said, voice low and firm, "Elias's will is extremely clear. He updated it 6 months before his death to protect you." My heart pounded as he read aloud. "I, Elias Vaughn, leave our primary residence at 1180 Pinecrest Terrace to my beloved wife, Loretta Vaughn, along with all furnishings and personal effects. I further leave her 70% of all financial assets, accounts, and investments, totaling approximately $37.8 million. My chest tightened. The numbers blurred. 70% the house. Everything that mattered. Mr. Fitzgerald continued, flipping to the next page. "To my daughter, Amara Vaughn, I leave $16.2 million to be held in trust and distributed beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her respectful and compassionate treatment of her mother following my death." Stared at the words like they were written in fire. Contingent on her treatment of me. He had known Elias. Had known exactly what Amara was capable of. Mr. Fitzgerald closed the folder and looked me in the eyes. "Loretta, your daughter didn't just mislead you. What she did is fraud, elder abuse, criminal manipulation. Elias built that clause into the trust specifically because he feared she would try to take advantage of you." I felt something inside me shift, in emotional tectonic plates sliding into place. "Mr. Fitzgerald, she forced me out of my home. She handed me $200. She told me to find somewhere to die." His jaw clenched. "Then she violated the trust clause completely. Legally, Amara has forfeited every dollar Elias designated for her. Every cent of the $16.2 million now reverts to you." My heartbeat roared in my ears. "So you're saying?" "I'm saying," he said gently, "you are the rightful heir to the entire $54 million estate. The house, the assets, everything Elias left behind." Shock chilled me. Relief warmed me. Betrayal burned me. Amara hadn't just lied, she had stolen. She had humiliated me. She had tossed me aside like I was an obstacle, standing between her and a fortune she was never meant to have. And now that fortune legally belonged to me. I exhaled a trembling breath. "What do I do now?" Mr. Fitzgerald leaned forward. "Now, Loretta, we take everything she tried to steal and put it back in your hands, and we hold her accountable." In that moment, something inside me, something Amara believed she destroyed, came back to life. A strength I forgot I had. A fight I didn't know was still in me. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a woman with truth, power, and the law on her side. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. Within an hour, Attorney Fitzgerald's office transformed from a quiet legal space into the headquarters of a silent war. Phones rang, files opened, experts were called, and I sat in his leather chair, watching the first sparks of justice ignite. Detective Rosa Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman with the posture of someone who had seen every kind of deception, stepped into the room carrying a forensic folder. The moment she unfolded the documents Amara had given me, the fake inheritance statement she used to evict me, her expression darkened. "These are forged," she said, "not amateur forgeries, professionally structured ones. Someone with legal or financial access helped create these." I swallowed hard. "You believe Kendrick was involved?" She nodded. "Given his banking background, almost certainly. A document like this doesn't come from a desktop printer. This was planned. Planned, my daughter hadn't acted out of sudden impulse or grief. She had built a scheme, prepared it, practiced it, and executed it on me while I was still mourning the man I loved. Detective Rodriguez continued. We're already freezing all Vaughn financial accounts until rightful ownership is verified. Any credit cards tied to those accounts will stop working immediately. A slow realization dawned on me. Amara didn't know any of this was happening yet. Her world was still intact, but it wouldn't be for long. Mr. Fitzgerald dialed the banks. His tone clipped and authoritative. Freeze all outgoing transfers. Suspend access. The rightful beneficiary is present. Detective Rodriguez added, we're also putting holds on the utilities. Amara has no legal claim to that home. Anything she tries to switch to her name will be reversed. The efficiency was staggering, like watching a chess match played by masters. And for the first time since Elias's death, I felt control returning to my fingertips. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my phone lit up. Amara. Calling like nothing had happened. I answered calmly. Hello? Amara Mom? Her voice was sharp, irritated. There's some kind of issue with the accounts. The bank is saying everything is frozen. I can't access a single card. Kendrick can't either. What's going on? I stood, staring through Mr. Fitzgerald's window at the city skyline. I'm sitting in Attorney Fitzgerald's office. Silence. Then a breath. Why are you there? Because he read the real will to Mitha. Will you hid? The will you forged documents to cover up. The will your father signed 6 months before he died. Her voice wavered, but pride fought to hold control. Mom, you're confused. You're grieving. You don't understand the complexity of these accounts. Sweetheart, I said, letting the word settle like cold steel. I understand perfectly. You lied. You forged legal documents. You threw your mother out of her own home. That's not true. The trust clause your father put in place. I interrupted. You violated it fully. That $16.2 million you thought was yours. It belongs to me now. Elias made sure of that. Her breath hitched audibly. That's not possible. I glanced at Detective Rodriguez, who gave me a small, approving nod. If you like, I said, I can put Detective Rodriguez on the phone. She has a few questions for you regarding the fraud charges. A sharp inhale, a scramble, then Amara's voice cracked through the receiver. Mom, please, can we meet somewhere and talk like adults? Oh, we'll talk, I said. Just not the way you think. Your next conversation will be in a courtroom. You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter. I looked Mr. Fitzgerald straight in the eyes. Watch me. I hung up. The room fell silent. Detective Rodriguez exhaled. That was powerful, Mrs. Vaughn. Loretta, I corrected gently, and I'm not done. She gave a small, confident smile. Good, because based on what we found, we'll have a warrant tonight. Amara will be arrested before the day ends. And Kendrick? I asked. His financial records are already flagged, she said. If he helped forge those documents, which he almost certainly did, he'll face federal charges. I murmured. Let the truth do what it needs to do. Hours later, while the sun dipped behind Atlanta's skyline, a wave of quiet satisfaction washed over me. For years, I had been dismissed, overlooked, treated like a background character in my own life. But now, the law was on my side. The truth was on my side. And my daughter, who believed she had played the perfect game, was about to discover that she wasn't the queen on the board. I was at 8:30. That night, just as the city lights flickered across Atlanta's skyline, Detective Rodriguez called with the words I had been waiting for. They're arresting her now. I stood still, listening to the quiet hum of Attorney Fitzgerald's office as he packed papers into a briefcase. The next sound I heard was Rodriguez's voice cutting cleanly through the phone. She's at Le Montour Bistro with Kendrick and friends. She stood up when the officers approached her, tried to argue, then demanded to call a lawyer. She's in cuffs now. Kendrick is next. A strange calm settled over me, not joy, not vengeance, but a release I didn't know my chest needed. For the first time in weeks, I felt my lungs fill fully. I left Fitzgerald's office and returned to the one place I never thought I'd see again, my home. The driveway looked the same, but everything else felt different. My keys still worked. When the lock clicked and the door opened, the familiar scent of pine cleaner and lavender oil rose up to greet me like a memory reaching out. The foyer lights were still on. Amara must have left in a hurry. I stepped inside and closed the door. Behind me, my house, not hers, not Kendrick (mine). For the first time in 43 years, I walked into the master bedroom without Elias beside me. He had always kept things in perfect order, shirts arranged by color, Shoes lined with military precision, cufflinks stored in velvet boxes. Now that space had been invaded, Amara had already moved her belongings, in designer dresses draped over chairs. Luxury skincare lined across the vanity, silk robes tossed carelessly on the bed. She'd claimed this room as if I were already buried 6 feet under. I refused to let her chaos have the last word. I grabbed garbage bags from the kitchen and began clearing everything she had brought in. I didn't fold. I didn't organize. I didn't sort. I dumped every shirt, every heel, every bottle of perfume, every bag on into plastic sacks that I tied and dragged to the front porch. Let her pick them up when she figured out how to make bail. Not my problem. I stripped the sheets from the bed and replaced them with the linen set Elias and I had used on our last anniversary. I stood there for a moment, fingertips grazing the fabric, letting myself breathe him in again. This room didn't feel like mine because for decades, I had shaped it around someone else's likes, dislikes, habits. I had spent my marriage making sure Elias felt at home, so much so that I'd forgotten what my own home was supposed to feel like. But now, the walls felt different. The air felt different. I felt different. The phone rang again. Attorney Fitzgerald's warm voice filled my ear. Loretta, I wanted to update you. Amara's bail is set at $50,000. All accounts are frozen, so unless she finds an outside source, she's staying put. As for Kendrick, his bail is $200,000. The judge saw his financial record and was unimpressed. I laughed softly. Something I hadn't done genuinely since before Elias died. Anything else I should know? Yes, he said. The forensic accountant uncovered that Kendrick had been under investigation for securities fraud long before Elias passed. This wasn't new. Amara knew pieces of it. He knew everything. My chest tightened, not in pain, but in realization. My daughter hadn't just fallen for a criminal. She had chosen him. She had sided with him. She had mirrored him. Fitzgerald continued. Loretta, it's time you start deciding what you want to do with the house. There's no need to wait. You have full legal control now. Full control. 2 words I never expected to hear again. I walked through the home, past the dining table where family birthdays once lived, past the photos lining the hallway, past the memories that suddenly looked different under the truth. Amara had already brought in contractors. She had plans, tearing out the kitchen, replacing hardwood floors, turning Elias's study into a wine tasting room. Her vision was cold, empty, rooted in status and spectacle. Mine was rooted in something deeper. Freedom. I want renovations, I told Fitzgerald, but not hers, mine. Good, he replied. Do whatever brings you peace. Peace. That was the word I had been chasing without knowing it. Piece by piece, decision by decision, hour by hour, my life was shifting from something inherited to something rebuilt. I spent the rest of the night mapping out changes, windows that actually opened, a kitchen filled with sunlight, a master bedroom that reflected me. Not 40 years of compromise. At midnight, standing alone in the quiet of my home, I felt a sense of grounding I hadn't felt since before. Elias's passing. Not because my daughter was gone, not because justice was moving, but because I was beginning to reclaim myself. Everything. Amara tried to take my home, my security. My identity was returning to me piece by piece, and by morning, the world would know that Loretta Vaughn wasn't a woman to be discarded. She had just begun. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, illuminating the quiet stillness of a house that finally felt like mine again. As I made coffee, the phone buzzed with a call from Channel 9 Atlanta News. A soft-voiced reporter named Janet Cummings spoke gently, but with the kind of practiced seriousness that comes from years of covering human interest stories. Mrs. Vaughn, we received word that you've been the victim of a significant elder fraud case involving your daughter. We'd be honored if you'd consider sharing your story. You could help countless seniors recognize the warning signs. Her words resonated deeper than I expected. I wasn't the only woman pushed aside by her own blood. I wasn't the only mother manipulated by children who thought power and money were greater than love. I'll think about it, I told her. If I choose to speak, I'll want control over the final edit. You'll have it, she assured. I hung up and stood still for a moment, letting the weight of that offer settle. Telling my story meant exposing not just Amara's cruelty, but the years I had let myself shrink to keep peace. But maybe that was exactly why I needed to tell it. Before I could finish the thought, the doorbell rang. I recognized the silhouette through the glass instantly, hair messy, clothes wrinkled, mascara smudged like soot under her eyes. Amara. She looked nothing like the polished woman who called herself my daughter. She looked like someone who had finally run out of lies to hide behind. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She stood on the porch like someone who no longer knew where she belonged. "Mom," she whispered, "please, can we talk?" "We talked already," I said, my voice steady. "You told me to find somewhere to die. I found somewhere better in my own home." Her eyes reddened instantly. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made choices. Repeated choices." She clasped her hands tightly in front of her, fighting to stay composed. I was overwhelmed. After Daddy died, after everything, I thought you couldn't manage things. I thought that I was weak. I finished for her. That I was incompetent. That I was in the way. She dropped her gaze, her lips trembling. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. But you meant it enough to put your name on forged documents. You meant it enough to walk into my home, tell me it was yours, and kick me out of it." She didn't deny it. For once in her life, she had nothing left to hide behind. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of her expensive perfume, one I had bought her on her 30th birthday. I looked at her and saw not a villain, not a stranger, but the child I'd raised with gentleness she never learned to return. Then, I remembered the file in Fitzgerald's office. The real will. The trust clause. Line Elias wrote to protect me. "Your father was worried about you," I said quietly. "Worried about your entitlement. Worried about how you treated people. Worried about what you'd do when faced with money and power." Her face drained of color. "Daddy said that." "No, he recorded it." I pulled out my phone and tapped the video file Fitzgerald had given me. Ilias's voice filled the porchsteady.com. "Heartbreakingly real. Amara," he said in the video, "if you're hearing this, it means you chose selfishness over integrity. I hoped you'd prove me wrong. But if this recording is being played, you didn't." Each sentence sliced through her, leaving nothing to hide behind. Elias continued. "Your mother gave up dreams, opportunities, and time for this family. She deserved your respect. If you failed her, then you failed me." By the time the recording ended, Amara had sunk onto the porch steps, her shoulders trembling with raw, unfiltered sobs. Not the dramatic tears she used to manipulate people. These were the tears of someone finally forced to see herself clearly. "He hated me," she whispered. "No," I said. "He loved you enough to tell the truth. You hated accountability." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you face the consequences. The fraud charges, the investigation, the public humiliation when this story becomes news. All of it." She gasped softly. "Mom, please, think about the grandchildren. Think about Kendrick's career. Did you think about any of that when you threw me out?" I asked. "Did you think about how your children would feel if their grandmother ended up homeless? Or how they'd see you if they knew what you did?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice shook. "I never wanted to hurt you that way. I wanted security. I wanted money. I didn't want to struggle ever again." For the first time, she was honest, and it didn't make her any more innocent. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but wanting something doesn't justify destroying everything around you to get it." She nodded slowly, like a child learning a lesson too late. "Tell me what I can do to fix this." "You can start by telling the truth," I said. "Not excuses, not justifications. The truth. Everything else you'll deal with in court." For a long moment, she stared at Metrally, as if seeing for the first time that I was not the weak woman she believed she could control. "I deserve this, don't I?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "You do." Her shoulders sagged. She was no longer the daughter who marched into my home demanding ownership. She was a woman stripped of privilege, arrogance, and illusion. But her downfall didn't restore anything between us. Some things break once and stay broken. And as she walked away from the porch, tears streaming down her face, I felt no satisfactions, just certainty. The justice she set in motion was coming for her, and I wasn't going to stop it. 3 days after Amara's porchside meltdown, I was settling into the rhythm of reclaiming my home. Contractors were emailing blueprints for renovations. The police were finalizing evidence. And Attorney Fitzgerald was coordinating the paperwork that placed every inch of the estate back in my name. But power attracts pressure, and trouble always finds its own company. On a crisp Thursday morning, the doorbell rang again. Through the glass, I saw a tall, elegant woman in a tailored cream suit, her posture stiff with wealth and entitlement. It was Eleonora Holt-Kendrick's mother. No compassion in her eyes, no humility, just a cold determination that told me exactly what she came for. "Mrs. Vaughn," she said with a tight smile as I opened the door, "we need to discuss this situation." I stepped aside not because I wanted her inside, But because I wanted to hear every word, she thought she could brandish like a weapon. Ellie walked into my living room as if she owned the deed. She didn't sit until she chose to. She crossed her legs delicately, diamonds flashing on her wrists. The air around her smelled like expensive orchids and quiet threats. Kendrick made some unfortunate choices, she began. However, prosecuting him is unnecessary. He's a respected banker, a father of two, and a pillar of our community. I leaned back in my chair. Respected? He forged legal documents. He helped steal my inheritance. She gave a soft laugh. Documents can be misunderstood. You're grieving. Amara was overwhelmed. Things got confused. Nothing was confused. It was fraud. She waved her manicured hand dismissively. My son was following Amara's lead. She has always been impulsive. Emotional. You know how daughters can be. My jaw tightened. Kendrick is a grown man who knew exactly what he was doing. Her smile thinned. Mrs. Vaughn, let's be honest. You don't understand complex financial structures. That confusion is precisely why this misunderstanding happened. She didn't even flinch when the insult left her mouth. Eleonora, get to your point, I said. She reached into her designer bag and slid a crisp envelope onto the coffee table. Our family is prepared to offer you $2 million in exchange for dropping all charges against Kendrick. You'll get your house back, your dignity restored, and this whole mess can go away quietly. Stared at the envelope. $2 million. A number that meant nothing compared to what her son tried to steal from me. You believe my piece is worth $2 million? I asked. She leaned forward. Mrs. Vaughn, be reasonable. Kendrick has a career to protect, a family, a future. Sending him to prison helps no one. It helps justice, I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. The diamonds didn't shine as brightly under that glare. You're destroying two families over money you never even knew how to manage. There, it was. The same arrogance that lived inside Amara, the same entitlement that had poisoned their marriage from the beginning. I stood. We're done. Eleonora rose to, smoothing her suit, as if she hadn't just attempted to buy my silence. $5 million, she said suddenly. I paused. $5 million to let her criminal son walk free. No, I said. Money won't erase what he did. Her expression shifted from irritation to something colder, something calculated. You should know, she said slowly, that Kendrick's legal team has discovered information about your husband's business practices, things that could become public during a trial, things that might make you reconsider who the real criminal was. A threat, a direct, bold, unapologetic threat. What information? I asked. She smiled, not with kindness, but triumph. The kind that could tarnish your memory of Elias forever. She walked toward the door with the grace of a woman convinced she had regained the upper hand. Think carefully, Mrs. Vaughn, she said as she pulled the door open, because once this goes to trial, you may not like the truths that come out. When the door shut behind her, the house felt colder. Not because of Eleonora's words, but because I knew one thing. She wasn't bluffing, and if she was willing to throw Ilias's reputation into the fire to save her son, then her family must have found something truly dangerous. I didn't panic, I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Attorney Fitzgerald. Eleonora Holt just threatened to expose Elias, I said. I want to know what she thinks she found. He exhaled heavily. Loretta, uncovering Ilias's business history might reveal things you may not be prepared for. I'm prepared for the truth, I said. Whatever it is. He hesitated. Then we'll bring in a specialist, someone who can dig deeper. Good, I replied, because whatever they think they know, I want to know it first. Before Kendrick told his version, before the courtroom heard rumors, before anyone dared to tarnish Ilias's name, this was no longer just about fraud, it was about uncovering a history buried beneath decades of trust, and if the truth was dangerous, I'd face it standing upright. Because I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for the legacy of the man I loved. The following morning, a woman named Carol Chen, a private investigator recommended by Attorney Fitzgerald, arrived at my house. She was sharp, focused, and carried herself like someone who had peeled back the secrets of powerful people for a living. Mrs. Vaughn, she said, stepping into Ilias's old study, I'm going to need full access to every document your husband kept. I opened the filing cabinets, the drawers, the safe behind the bookshelf. Ilias's handwriting filled the room. Careful signatures, meticulous notes, stacks of financial statements organized by date. For the first hour, Carol worked quietly, photographing documents and piecing together Then her posture shifted, her eyes narrowed. She began pulling papers faster, sorting them into piles that made sense, only to someone fluent in forensic accounting, after 6 hours. She finally looked up double quotes, "Mrs. Vaughn, we need to talk." My heart clenched. Her tone was not the tone of good news. She motioned for me to sit, and I did, feeling a weight settle in the room. "Your husband," she said carefully, "was involved in something much bigger than anything your daughter, or her husband ever imagined." I held my breath. Elias was running a money laundering operation through his consulting firm. The floor tilted under me. "No," I whispered. "Elias wasn't like that." She placed 2 documents in front of me, payment records connected to shell companies, consulting fees for non-existent services, transfers that aligned with known criminal activity. "I'm sorry," she said, "but the evidence is overwhelming. These transactions span at least 12 years. It was sophisticated, well hidden, and continuous." I stared at the signatures, Elias's looping cursive, his ironed dress shirts, his warm smile. A man I thought I knew. How could I not have known? I murmured. Carol's voice softened. "Men who run operations like this don't tell their wives. They keep it in back rooms and locked cabinets. They shield their families, not out of love, but necessity." The betrayal stung deeper than anything Amara had done. "What does this mean for me?" I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a blade's edge. "The funds Elias left behind, the investments, the accounts, a large portion came directly from laundered money. If the FBI uncovers this, they could seize everything as criminal proceeds. Everything: the house, the newly returned inheritance, the fortune Amara tried to steal, and I had just one back gone." I pressed a hand to my chest. "Is there any chance the FBI doesn't find out?" Carol looked at me with a seriousness that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Vaughn, I don't think the question is if they find out. The question is, who tells them first." "What do you mean?" She slid another file across the table. Kendrick's law team was already digging into Elias's financials. As a banker, he would have recognized the laundering patterns immediately. And now that he's facing multiple felonies, they're likely preparing to use Elias's crimes as leverage. "To get a deal," I whispered. "Yes," she said. "If they reveal this to the FBI before you come forward, they can frame it as cooperation and protect themselves. Meanwhile, you could be investigated for benefiting, even unknowingly, from illegal funds." My stomach tightened painfully. "So I lose everything," I said. She nodded. "And they walk away clean." She nodded again. I stood slowly, staring at Elias's desk, the mahogany surface he polished every Sunday, the place where he'd tell me he was reviewing contracts while humming old jazz tunes. But beneath that gentleman persona was a man laundering money through fake companies. Barely recognized the life I had lived. Before I could speak again, my phone rang. "Amara." Her voice was tight, breathless. "Mom, we need to meet tonight. There are things about Daddy that change everything. Things Kendrick's lawyers found." "I already know," I said. Silence. "Then you know what?" "I know about the shell companies. The laundered funds. I know how deep it goes." Her exhale was shaky. "Then you understand why we need to work together." "I'm listening." She rushed through her words. "Kendrick's lawyers talked to the FBI. They can negotiate a deal. If you agree not to press the fraud charges, we'll go to them with Daddy's financial crimes. In return, they'll let you keep the house and about $5 million in clean assets. The rest will be seized. Kendrick gets immunity. My charges go away." It was the most calculated offer she'd ever made. "So let me get this straight," I said. "I help you and Kendrick escape punishment. I sacrifice the inheritance Elias left me, and I get a fraction of what I'm owed." "It's the best solution," she said, her voice trembling. "Otherwise you could lose everything." "Mom, I'm trying to save us." "No," I said. "You're trying to save yourself." "It's practical," she insisted. "You're being emotional. You don't understand the law." I closed my eyes for a moment. 4 weeks. Everyone had treated me like I was fragile, helpless, naive, but the truth was something Amara never understood. I was quiet, not blind. I was patient, not weak. And I had finally reached the point where I was done being underestimated. "I need time to think," I told her. "You don't have time," she snapped. "The FBI meeting is tomorrow morning. Kendrick's lawyer needs your answer tonight." I hung up, not out of disrespect, but out of clarity. I walked into Elias's study, ran my fingers across the desk that had anchored decades of lies, and let the weight of everything settle. My husband laundered millions. My daughter forged documents to steal from me. My son-in-law lied to protect himself, and now, all three of them in life or in crime, had put me in the path of a legal hurricane. But what Amara didn't know was this. Cornering me wasn't the checkmate she thought it was her biggest mistake. I picked up my phone and dialed Carol. "Can you get me a meeting with the FBI?" I asked. She inhaled. "Yes, how soon?" "Tonight," I said, "because I have a story they need to hear, and it's going to blow every deal Kendrick thinks he's making out of the water." I ended the call, stood tall, and breathed deeply. For the first time since Elias died, I wasn't reacting, I was deciding. And decisions made by a woman who's been stripped of everything don't tremble. They cut by sunset. I was sitting in a quiet conference room deep inside the downtown FBI field office. The walls were neutral gray, the lighting soft but unforgiving, and the air carried the sharp scent of printer ink and authority. Across from me sat Agent Sarah Martinez, a woman whose calm confidence could cut through steel. She listened while I laid out everything: Eliza's hidden dealings, Amara and Kendrick's forged documents, Eleonora's threats, and the attempted blackmail disguised as a deal. She recorded every detail, her pen moving with clinical precision. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Mrs. Vaughn," she said, "you're potentially admitting you lived off proceeds connected to criminal activity." "I lived off the money my husband told me was earned legally," I replied, "and I'm here voluntarily because I refused to let my daughter and her husband weaponize information I didn't even know existed." She studied me, her expression unreadable. "You're not afraid, Agent Martinez?" 2 weeks ago, I was a widow sleeping in a motel after my daughter stole my home. Today, I'm sitting across from federal agents telling the truth. I don't have room left for fear. A slow smile touched her lips. It wasn't condescending, it was respect. "Mrs. Vaughn," she said, "would you be willing to wear a wire?" My heartbeat steadied. Not a spike of fear, not hesitation, just clarity. "Yes," I said. 3 hours later, back in my living room, a tiny recording device was taped under my blouse. 2 FBI agents sat parked down the street in an unmarked sedan. Another agent waited near the kitchen window with a mic receiver. The house was silent, too silent, as I prepared myself for what was about to happen. At 8 p.m. sharp, a car pulled into the driveway. Amara and Kendrick stepped out together, dressed like they were arriving at a business negotiation instead of the scene of their own destruction. Kendrick carried a briefcase. Amara wore a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. I opened the door. "Come in." They entered confidently, completely unaware that every word was about to become evidence. "Mom," Amara said, trying to sound warm. "You look better." "I feel better," I replied. "Have a seat." Kendrick wasted no time. He sat at the dining table, opened the briefcase, and laid out several documents. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said smoothly, "this agreement gives you the house and $5 million in clean assets. In exchange, you withdraw all charges and cooperate with us to present Ilias's financial situation to the FBI." I studied him. "Clean assets," I repeated. "Interesting phrase." He nodded proudly. "Funds verified to be untainted by your husband's activities." "So," I said, "I sacrificed nearly the entire $54 million Elias left behind. Also, you two can walk away free." "Walk away is a dramatic phrase," he said. "We simply avoid unnecessary legal conflict." "And what do you get?" I asked. Amara leaned forward. "Mom, this protects all of us. Kendrick keeps his license. I avoid prison. You keep the house. This is the practical solution." "Practical," I echoed, my tone flat. "Tell me something, Kendrick. When did you discover Ilias's connections?" He blinked. "What do you mean? Did you know before you married Amara? Or did you discover it while planning to steal my inheritance?" His jaw tightened. "Mrs. Vaughn, that's irrelevant." "No," I said calmly. "It's very relevant." Amara shifted, sensing a crack forming but not understanding why. "Mom, please," she said, "don't complicate this. We can still make this work." I tilted my head. "Make what work? The fraud? The forged will? The plan to steal my home? Or the new plan to blackmail me with Elias's past?" Kendrick's mask slipped. He straightened, eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said sharply, "this conversation is over." I smiled, slow, deliberate, final. "No, Kendrick," I said, "it's just beginning." At that exact moment, Agent Martinez stepped into the doorway, flanked by 2 federal agents. The shock on Amara's face was instant and absolute. Kendrick's hand froze over his briefcase. "Amara Von Holt," Agent Martinez said. And Kendrick Holt, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Amara gasped. Mom, you set us up. No, I said. You set yourselves up when you tried to ruin me. Kendrick stood abruptly, reaching for his briefcase like it was a life raft. Margaret, you don't understand, he said. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. There are people connected to Elias's business who won't appreciate federal attention. Agent Martinez stopped mid-sentence and turned sharply toward him. Mr. Holt, she said coldly, are you threatening a federal witness? He swallowed hard. I'm warning her of the danger. Congratulations, she said. You just added witness intimidation to your charges. Amara broke then, truly broke, the arrogance gone, the calculation melting away, leaving only panic and disbelief. Mom, she sobbed as agents cuffed her wrists. How could you do this to us? The same way you could throw me out of my home, I replied. Except I did it legally. Kendrick glared at me as they led him away. You've started something you can't control. No, I said. I ended something I should have stopped a long time ago. The agents escorted them out, their voices swallowed by the hum of the night. When the door closed, the quiet that followed wasn't heavy, it was victorious. Agent Martinez turned to me. Mrs. Vaughn, you handled yourself exceptionally. Thank you, I said. What happens next? Now, she said gently, we tell you the part Elias never could. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. The truth is bigger than what you discovered, she continued, and it changes everything. Agent Martinez motioned for me to sit. Her expression shifting into something heavier, something that told me the truth she was about to reveal. Didn't just explain the past, it rewrote it. Mrs. Vaughn, she began, before we move forward. You need to understand the full scope of what your husband was involved in. I braced myself. Go on. She placed a thick folder on my coffee table. It was packed with surveillance photos, financial charts, coded documents, and confidential memos stamped with FBI headers. Your husband wasn't just laundering money, she said. He was covertly working with the FBI. For 12 years, he acted as a deep cover informant. The words hit like a physical force. What? My voice barely made sound. She nodded. Elias was part of one of our most sensitive operations. The criminals he appeared to work with never knew he was helping us dismantle their network. He funneled information directly into a classified pipeline. I stared at the files, my pulse hammering. But the laundering? The shell companies. All fabricated as part of maintaining his cover, she said. Every illegal transaction was monitored and approved. He didn't keep the money for personal gain. A portion went to maintain his identity inside the criminal organization, and another portion, the portion he kept, was legally compensated through our covert asset program. I blinked, stunned. He wasn't a criminal. No, she said. He was one of our most valuable assets. He helped us take down multiple high-level players, including members of the Torino organization. Over the span of his cooperation, his intel led to 47 arrests and over $200 million seized in criminal assets. My hand slowly rose to my mouth. The room felt unreal, like the ground had shifted under my feet. All those nights he stayed late at the office, I whispered. The business trips, the secrecy. Agent Martinez nodded. He was protecting you. The entire operation required absolute confidentiality. If he had told you anything, it would have put your life in danger. I sank into the sofa, a swirl of grief, awe, confusion, and revelation twisting inside me. So the money he left me, is it legal? A gentle smile touched her lips, the first warmth she had shown all evening. Yes, she said. Every cent of the $54 million inheritance is legally yours. The government verified that the funds Elias retained were his lawful compensation for years of work that risked his life. I pressed a hand against my heart, letting out a slow exhale I hadn't realized I was holding. All the shame I'd felt, all the doubt, all the heartbreak from believing Elias had lived a double life. It softened into something clearer. He had lived a double life, but not the kind I feared. He had protected me without me even knowing. I needed protecting. I looked up at Agent Martinez. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? The investigation wasn't fully closed until recently, she explained. And frankly, your daughter and son-in-law's fraud exposed details we needed to confirm your innocence. Their scheme inadvertently helped us wrap up loose ends. A bitter laugh escaped me. So Amara's attempt to destroy me actually helped clear my husband's name. Exactly, she said. Their crimes made your position undeniable. You weren't complicit. You were a victim. I let the weight of that truth settle deep in my bones. Then Agent Martinez added, There's more. My breath caught again. We believe Kendrick's warning about dangerous people wasn't entirely empty, but you're safe. The individuals Elias helped expose are facing indictments, arrests, and asset seizures across 3 states, starting tomorrow morning. They won't have time to think about retaliation. And Amara and Kendrick? I asked. They'll face federal charges, she said. Their bail will be revisited in front of a federal judge. Their attempt to blackmail you using Elias's undercover activity was a serious escalation. I leaned back, mind spinning but clearer than it had been for months. My husband had died, carrying a burden I never knew existed. My daughter had tried to steal a fortune that wasn't hers. My son-in-law had weaponized half-truths. He didn't understand, but now the truth was finally mine. Agent Martinez stood. Mrs. Vaughn, you have your home, your inheritance, and your legal standing. What happens next is up to you. I nodded slowly. What happens next? Is that I live? She paused at the door. For what it's worth, the strength you showed in all this, most people don't have it. Maybe I didn't either, I said, until I had no other choice. She gave one last respectful nod and left. The house fell into a deep, quiet stillness. Not the empty silence of grief. The full silence of truth. Landing on solid ground, I walked to Elias's study, touching the desk he'd used for his secret work, seeing him now with new eyes. Not a liar, not a criminal, a man who carried danger so I could feel safe. I whispered into the quiet, you did what you had to do, and now so will I. For the first time since he died, I felt connected to him again, not through tears, but through truth, and the truth had finally set the stage for everything that would follow. 6 months passed. And with every sunrise, the woman I used to be drifted further away, the quiet widow who once folded into herself after Elias's death was gone, the mother who allowed her daughter to define her worth no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal. My home, now fully renovated with warm oak floors, soft caramel walls, and wide sunlit windows, felt like a new beginning wrapped inside old memories. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee every morning. Jazz floated through the house at dusk. And every room whispered the same truth. I survived what was meant to break me. I was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, when Dr. Sarah Chen, Carol's younger sister and now my financial advisor, walked into the kitchen carrying a binder thick with portfolio reports. Morning, Loretta, she said, smiling. You're glowing today. I feel like it, I told her. Let's see how the foundation is doing. We sat at my breakfast table, a round walnut piece I'd chosen myself. Not because it matched anything, but because it made me feel grounded. Sarah opened the binder. Your investments are strong. The Margaret Vaughn Foundation for Elder Protection is fully operational, and the scholarship fund. We've selected the first group of recipients. The foundation had become my heartbeat. With $15 million dedicated to helping seniors facing financial abuse, I'd found purpose bigger than myself. We funded legal support, emergency housing, counseling, and legislative outreach. The media called me a warrior for the elderly. I called it, finally doing something with the life I had regained. And the documentary? I asked. Sarah smiled. Netflix confirmed the production schedule. Filming starts next month. They want to title it The Mother's Revenge, an American story. I laughed softly. Revenge isn't quite the word I'd use. No, she said, but it's the word the world understands. My story had stretched far beyond Atlanta interviews, podcasts, articles. People wrote to me from across the country, seniors who survived exploitation, mothers hurt by their children, widows who were never believed. Every message reminded me that my voice carried weight now. As Sarah flipped to the next page, her expression shifted. Loretta, she wrote again. My breath didn't hitch, my pulse didn't skip. I felt nothing. Amara, I asked. Yes, her lawyer says she wants forgiveness. She's written 17 letters so far. The letters were full of shifting tones, justification, regret, denial, apology, desperation, but none carried the accountability I needed. None showed the transformation required to earn a second chance. Don't open them, I said. Not yet. Sarah closed the binder gently. And the grandchildren? She's requesting supervised visits with them. I looked out the window at the tall pine trees I'd planted along the backyard fence, roots deep, branches reaching upward. My relationship with them will depend on who they choose to become, I said softly, not on their mother's mistakes. Sarah nodded, respecting the boundary without pushing. A delivery truck rolled into the driveway. The doorbell rang. That must be the new furniture for my art studio, I said. Ilyas's old den had transformed into a bright creative space. Soft lighting, wide tables, an easel by the window. I had rediscovered painting, something I'd given up years ago when marriage, motherhood, and domestic demands swallowed my free time. Before you answer, Sarah said gently, can I ask something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret how it all unfolded? The arrests, the media storm, losing your daughter. I paused, not to find the answer, but to appreciate how deeply the question deserved honesty. I don't regret the truth, I said finally. Painful as it was, it freed me. Amara made her choices. Kendrick made his, Elias made his, and I made mine. And the relationship with Amara. Some relationships die long before the final argument, I said. She didn't lose me this year. She lost me the moment she decided money mattered more than blood. Sarah studied me, absorbing the gravity of the words. I'm not angry anymore, I added. I'm awake. We finished our review, and Sarah gathered her things. You've built something powerful, Loretta, she said before leaving. Not many people rise the way you did. Thank you, I replied, but I didn't rise alone. I rose because I stopped letting people drag me down. After she left, I went into the art studio. Sunlight spilled across the floor like gold. I uncovered my latest painting, but not of the woman I was 6 months ago. This woman stood tall beneath a blazing sky, chin lifted, eyes forward, a woman who had realized she was the prize, the power, the inheritance no one could steal. I picked up a brush, added one more stroke of warm bronze to the portrait's cheek, and stepped back. She looked strong. She looked unbreakable. She looked like me outside. The sun dipped low, casting shadows that danced along my studio walls. My home, my wealth, my peace, all of it reclaimed through the very strength people assumed I didn't have. What came next was up to me. A new chapter, a new purpose, a new woman. And if one day Amara wanted to know that woman again, she'd need more than apologies and letters. She'd need transformation. Real transformation, the kind that takes years, not pages. Because I wasn't the mother she once discarded. I was the mother she could never break. And I wasn't going back.